Hey, this is John Willis again. This is another one of those. We're doing this DevOps Days 5-year anniversary video where I'm going in. I'm trying to track down some of the people that were at that first event and just ask them a bunch of stupid questions. So this guest I have is Kris Buytaert. So I start with a little how I met Kris, and I realized I met Kris way before uh, DevOps Days, the event. Actually, I'd been writing a blog kind of describing, my experiences of Tivoli and trying to explore the open source tooling. And Kris was one of the early readers of my blog, and I happened to be doing a Tivoli class in Europe, and I happened to be there over a weekend. And Kris was like, "Well, why don't you come over to this TDOS thing we're running?" So I didn't even know. And back then we didn't have our icons too well, so Kris, I think Kris said he identified me because I think I had the ops this hat on, maybe, I don't know, ops can, and I was wearing a Xenos jacket, so he kind of knew who I was. So hey Kris, how's it going?
Hey, hi John. I'm fine. Busy, but that's good.
Yeah, busy times, huh? A lot of
Yeah.
crazy stuff going on out there. They keep throwing this new technology at us, so we can't keep up. So what I wanted to do is, like I told you, I want to go through, so what the Ghent, the that Ghent DevOps days, the original kind of ground zero, if you will. How'd you wind up going there?
Um, the way I remember it is that somewhere in April of that year, that was 2009, right? We had a cloud camp in Antwerp, in the Antwerp Zoo, and that's where I met Patrick, and we started discussing a lot of things, and we figured out there's a lot of events where we've been to, where we've been talking to people about the same stuff, about how we do software deployment, how we do infrastructure management at scale, and how the field there is changing. And we pretty much figured that because we were walking with the same people, talking to them, and learning from them, that there was a gap in conferences in Europe. There was a gap where we had no common event to discuss these topics. There were a bunch of Linux open source events, thinking about FLOSS UK, the Linux conferences. There was FOSDEM. There was a lot of operational stuff going on. And then they were the developer conferences, like Devox and PHP conferences and Ruby conferences. But there was really nothing where those two groups met. Um, then stuff happened. Basically, at that point, we figured out, well, what if we organize something like that? That was the idea was born. And then a couple of months later, Velocity happened, and Patrick actually put the name to the event. He started looking for a venue, and because he was working at the IBBT back then, he had an office there. He could get the venue there. I decided to help out with some sponsoring, and before we knew it, it was a weird Thursday evening, and I saw some guy from Atlanta tweeting that he was still at some conference, some I don't even remember what it was, some conferences in the States, and I was like, okay, so he's not coming. And then the next morning was Friday morning of DevOps days, and I walk into the building in Ghent, and you're there too. And that's pretty much how I ended up there. Having a chat with Patrick about, hey, we should do this thing, and then inviting a bunch of speakers and inviting a bunch of friends, like, hey, come over, guys, this is going to be interesting, and well, the rest is history.
It's kind of, I hate to get philosophical, but it was fate. I knew I had to be there. And I was at Canonical at the time, and I talked to Patrick, and he said, well, he said if you can get Canonical to pay for you to come over, we'll give Canonical sponsorship. So I was working with Simon Wardley, and I'm like, Simon, I've got to go to this DevOps Days thing. He goes, what is it? I'm like, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. He says, but you're gonna have to trust me on this one. I said, you think, Canonical pony up? He's like, yeah, go for it. It's funny, but I couldn't even really explain it other than it was, something I knew I had to be there. But and Simon at that point was like, what the hell is that? Yeah, go ahead. But that's how I wound up. It was a last minute thing, I think. That's how I wound up showing up there, and I'm pretty glad I did. To that point. So to me, I've talked a lot, on my podcast and all, like, how insane that first kind of meeting was, and to me it was I was literally you know, I mean, it kind of rejuvenated my whole career. Gave me like enough fuel for another at least 5 years. But so, what are your thoughts about like that event and how it impacted you?
Um, to me, it was partially an acceleration of stuff which we were already doing. It was finally finding people who had similar problems, who were openly discussing them, and we were helping out each other. Pretty much the same as in the open source philosophy, where we were sharing code. We were now starting to share ideas and how you dealt with people and how you dealt with culture and different patterns from technology patterns. And if you look at the people who were there, a couple of them were already good friends of mine, which I've been working with for ages. And a couple of the others actually became good friends after the event. What was really, for me, new then, and that was one of the first events where I went and actually really participated in open spaces, was the openness and the friendliness that people were discussing topics with each other with. There was no egos in the room. There was just people with problems and other people with solutions. And the discussions that happened there were really to the point. They were not high-level bullshit stuff, but they were really like, well, we tried this and this and this, and that doesn't work. So what about you try it this way? People actually sitting down on a laptop, figuring out stuff. People actually building matrices of tools on the floor together. I vividly remember you with Matt Reckenberg and a couple of other people talking about what cloud tools were out there and what the different features in those tools were. And that matrix still is relevant today, probably. Stuff like that. And it was completely different for a lot of people to what you usually get from a conference. Also, the fact that people with different roles were there, people with completely different backgrounds, from more of an ops kind of perspective, but also development kind of perspective. That was the new thing. And well, it catched on apparently, because
It did all right. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd forgotten about that cloud matrix thing, right? That was even really early in cloud. It was about good 10 or 15 of us in that room, and we were kind of mapping out cloud structure. But you hit it spot on. I've done this thing with Lindsay Homewood already, and I've done one with Kris Reed, and we keep trying to identify. One of the things was common language, which seemed to be was a theme that everybody had the same ideas, but it was kind of a common way to talk about it. But you hit it spot on the sharing, like the no ego thing. I mean, even today, I get the chance every once in a while to kind of kick off a lot of the Devopsdays, days, and every once in a while I'll say, one of the things I love about this conference is there are no egos, and let's not be the one. This be the one where where we ruin that, but you're right. It was all these really dedicated, very smart people that just kind of wanted to just get stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
There was no time for anything else. That was really cool. So, but well, the other thing too, I think I think the reason why I'm reaching out to about 8 or 9 people, you being one of them, is not only were you there, but you've been a big part of this movement, and I think of Lindsay going off to Australia, Kris and Stephen and Stephen Nelson Smith and Ari and Paul Nazar all going off to London and creating stuff. I created a little bit of momentum in the U.S., and you basically kind of, you took Europe for the game of Risk, and you were, you've been, in my opinion, you're very much a mentor to me on a lot of stuff, but what are your thoughts about, just what's happened over the last 5 years?
I think what happened is what happens with a lot of those grassroots movements, where they start out as good ideas from people who have vision, who have passion, and over a period of time, people see it happen, see it grow, and they get envious, and they're like, we want to be part of the movement, but they don't really know how. And that's typically when the marketeers come in, when the salespeople come in. And what we've seen is that the movement as such has grown a lot, and a lot of people have been doing awesome stuff. But the last couple of years, I felt that a lot of the noise that is getting into the community is kind of getting a diffuse message. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to make real money from DevOps, which is a really hard thing to do. You cannot sell culture. There's no magic tool set which is going to solve all your problems. And that's not what the traditional vendors are used to. They're used to actually going in, selling a large budget project, and walk out 3 months later with a lot of money in their pocket. And that's not what DevOps is about. And what we see now is a real big struggle between people, actually practitioners, who are doing the legwork, we're doing the groundwork, who have experience on how to work with teams and who build stuff based on open source tooling, and the newer generation who still is not understanding what Agile is about, not really wanting to change the way they work, but they want to be the cool kids. And we've seen that with open source, we've seen that with the adoption of the internet, and we see it again with DevOps. And it's probably going to happen again with other new technologies. But what I really see is that the core movement as such, the people who do understand what it really is about, what we talk about culture, about automation, about monitoring and metrics and all those things, about the CAMS keyword, that movement is growing. And there's a large growing group of people talking and discussing best practices and growing further. And yes, there's sometimes a bit of not so interesting discussions going on about which tooling to use, but it's a smaller part. The core is still the culture part and how to deal with those things, and that's good. I specifically see that when you see the difference in events. If you look at the local DevOps days, which are really community organized, which are really started by a small number of passionate people. And if you look at the first couple of years, we did one in Europe, one in the States, one in Europe, one in the States. And I think last year or 2 years ago, we started doing, whenever people wanted to build one, they started doing that. And that has grown out to so many local events, so many people actually wanting to put their shoulders on their building an actual event without gaining money from it, without, well, gaining knowledge from it and gaining experience from it and being part of a community. And that's what I've seen grow a lot. Being involved in a lot of the European events, guiding them and coaching them, I've seen a lot of interesting people pop up and saying, hey, I want to help out, I want to talk about things, I want to discuss and help this movement grow. And that's really making me happy.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a good point there. I mean, because the vendors, God bless them, right? That's the way the wheels of progress work, right? The vendors need to figure out what's hot. Some of them have good intentions, some of them probably not so much. But the thing that probably gnaws all of them is they can't get their hands around this Devopsdays thing that Patrick and you and others created. Because it's funny, me and you are both core organizers, and we see these kind of silly emails come in from a large vendor saying, well, how can I be the top tier vendor for this event? And they're so used to like the expos and the interops and where you just pay the unlimited amount of money and you get to be the king of the hill, and we just don't let that happen. I love responding to those emails very politely. This is a bunch of volunteer organizers. It is not a profit-making organization, and almost like the little throw the cold water on them, you can sponsor, but here's the model. It's a gold, silver, and pick your poison, but it's not going to be. You're not getting any special treatment. You're not getting a speaker. You're not. And I think the fact that we've been able to do that as a community for 5 years is pretty awesome, and hopefully next 5 years too, right? Yeah, cool. All right, the last, horrible question. The future of DevOps.
It's gonna die horribly.
What?
It's gonna die horribly.
It's gonna die horribly.
Yeah.
It's gonna be Docker Ops, right? I swore I wasn't gonna say that.
Ops or Lego Ops or whatever. No, it's going to be around for a while. Just like Agile isn't disappearing, just like not that much things disappear. Maybe people are going to move into different areas of it. What I've seen is that we started doing DevOps days. After Rome, we saw Monotorama popping up. I myself found myself guilty of organizing config management camp to actually take out a couple of more technology-specific areas of what DevOps Days is about, because the communities there are growing also. And you'll see new events pop up, but you'll see evolution happening. One of the problems I see for DevOps Days as such is that we're now growing with a number of these events to ranges of 500-600 people. And open spaces only work up till a certain number of people in a group. If you're 50 people in a group, there's not going to be a lot of discussion. If there's 15 people in a group, it's going to be much easier. So the larger the communities grow, the larger the events grow, they're going to change. People are not going to get as much back from a DevOps Days with 500 people as they had from the DevOps Days with 100 people. So we need more local events. We need more people who stand up and do local things so it can stay small, but still interesting enough. And that's where I see a challenge for the future of DevOps Days. The future of DevOps as such, I think it's pretty guaranteed that we're going to keep using that word for a couple of more decades. It might evolve in what we're actually doing because technology is moving forward. It used to be that we're doing config management and monitoring, and we did some cloud work, and we might evolve to doing completely different things because technology behind it moves. That's stuff that happens, but the way we do deliver software and the way we do deploy things and manage and do operations, we're still going to need to do those things. We're still going to need to talk developers to operations people to management to purchasing to all those people. We still need to be aware that it's a common goal we need to deliver and that we need to work together. And as soon as we start forgetting about that, well, that's probably the end of DevOps. But I don't think that's going to happen. We need to continue working together, and we need to have a forum and a place where we can have those discussions.
No, I agree. I mean, the die is cast, right? I mean, the technologies will change, and we're seeing rapid changes in technology just right as we sit now. But I think that the die is cast on this kind of collaborative, something that was, I mean, for me, like I said, I really honestly was pretty fed up with IT. I mean, I was getting excited about open source and all, but I just felt that, what I had been doing for the prior 15 years with things like Tivoli and stuff like that I just wasn't moving the ball. I mean, there was something missing. I mean, I'd made, I paid for a couple of houses and a boat doing Tivoli consulting. It was good business while it lasted, but I always felt there was, there was a hole in my heart, and and that DevOps days for me was just like, it was enlightening to think that there was hope. Again, the risk of being too philosophical, and I think that's the reason why this movement has been so insane. Is it's so right, and to your point, I don't think that I don't see anybody changing that part of it.
Mm-hmm. No.
So well, cool. Well, you're definitely going to be in Ghent. I know that, right?
Yeah, we actually had we had a meeting in Ghent yesterday to kick off the actual organization. Well, the biggest part is already done because Patrick did a lot of legwork already, given that he's local in Ghent. He just tweeted that someone suggested to have massage chairs at DevOps Days like we had in Hamburg. That's the result of the meeting we had yesterday. I'm not sure if they're going to be there, but yeah, I'll be in Ghent for sure.
You have to be in Ghent. I'd have to go.
I hope to, well, I was supposed to be in Amsterdam also, but I hope to be in Ghent.
Oh. I'll have to go down and drag you wherever you're at and drag you back to Ghent.
Well, if I'm in the same shape as I was in Amsterdam, I was in my bed being sick, but I hope to be alive again.
Well, then I won't drag you out of bed. No. Well, my friend, it's actually been a pleasure getting to know you now. I think probably 7 years. I mean, just
yeah, something like that.
Pretty awesome. You're an awesome dude, except when you make fun of me, but that's okay. That's even okay too. All right. Thanks, everybody.